Hello, Internet. It is I, Malik Aaron, and welcome back to Box Office Recaps. So, after numerous delays, we finally get to talk about summer 2021, and I finally get to do a summer 2021 box office recap. Now, for those of you who don't know, I made a similar video 2 years ago, almost to the day, about summer 2019 and all the movies that came out during that time. I covered all of them in three separate videos. The good, the meh, and the oofs. And that video was, although it was long, it was fun to make. Well, those videos were fun to make. I wanted to do one last year, but I don't need to tell you what happened. I think you could all guess. And this year in the early part of this year, I was kind of worried if we were even going to get a summer box office at all, considering how many delays happened between like January and March. It was a bloodbath. But thankfully, we did get a summer season of sorts. Not super traditional, but it was better than nothing. So now I get to make this video, which will be a two-parter. Now, instead of last time I did this, it was winners and losers, plus a middle section for movies that were in neither category. This time I want to do something different. You see, throughout, this whole pandemic, and especially during the summer, there's been this constant war between streaming and theatrical, and the lines being continuously blurred between the two as movies decided to make rather unprecedented decision to release their movies in both theaters and on streaming platforms. Disney has done this, Warner Brothers has done this, Paramount and Universal, they've done this too. And it's led to quite the debate amongst us movie fans. And so instead of splitting this into winners and losers, which honestly would be a little difficult and be a bit harsh considering, what's been going on, with the pandemic and whatnot. Instead, it's going to be split into streaming and theatrical. Movies that were either theatrical only or they had a streaming release alongside theatrical release. That's how we're going to do it. And we're going to start with the streaming movies, the Disney Plus, the HBO Max, the Peacock, the Paramount Plus. We're starting with that. And then the next part we talk about theatrical only. And that way we get to, really compare how these movies did regarding the release strategy. So, yeah, that's what we're going to do. So, with all that being said, let's begin. Back in May, things were still quite bleak at the box office. May didn't start out too great. I mean, Wrath of Man did okay, but we'll talk about that more when we get to theatrical. We don't have our first real streaming movie. I know it says Army of the Dead. It had technically what? I'm just gonna call it a Netflix movie because it's way too confusing. But our first real streaming theatrical movie is Those Who Wish Me Dead, which is a part of the HBO Max experiment where Warner Brothers would take all their 2021 movies plus Wonder Woman 1984 and put them in both theaters and on HBO Max for approximately 30 days. That's how it goes. That's how it went. That rule applies to all the 2021 movies. 2022 theatrical only. So this is a 1 year only deal. And Those Who Wish Me Dead was, there was Wonder Woman, Little Things, Judas, Tom and Jerry, Godzilla vs. Kong, Mortal Kombat. This was the 7th HBO Max movie. And this did quite terrible box office wise, only making a mere $7 million total. That's not opening weekend. That's its entire run, which is just absolutely abysmal for any era. Now, most people would point out, oh, the HBO Max release, that cut into its movie's grosses because of piracy and the fact that this movie didn't look like it was worth going to the theater to see, so people would rather just watch it at home. There is a lot of truth to that, but I feel this movie would have struggled even without the pandemic because nothing about it screamed, "Oh yeah, I'll pay $15 to watch that on the big screen." Like nothing about this felt like an experience worth watching on the big screen. Nothing. It felt very small screenish. Hell, there's probably a lot of streaming movies and TV shows that look more exciting than this. Yeah, and the main actress here, Angelina Jolie. I mean, she's had hits in the past, but they were mainly for her action roles. Any other genre, it's been a bust. So, yeah, this movie was kind of screwed from the get go. It had no real, um, it didn't have much of a chance. So I wasn't surprised that it did so terrible. I mean, I was surprised a little bit about how terrible it did. But funny enough, it wasn't even the worst HBO Max performer. We'll get to that eventually. But yeah, Those Who Wish Me Dead did terrible. It didn't make the HBO Max experiment look any good. So after that, we don't get another streaming movie until Cruella. This was a part of Disney's Disney Plus Premier Access thing, where unlike HBO Max and that whole situation, this will be both theatrical and on Disney Plus. But here's the catch: if you want to watch it on Disney Plus, you need to pay $30. $30 to watch it on Disney Plus, which I think is absurd, ridiculous, egregious, and straight up greedy. I don't like that at all. And for all that Disney Plus Premier Access movies, I've never used it once because I thought it was a waste of money. And besides, you were going to get these movies for free on Disney Plus in a few months anyway. Hell, Cruella is free now on Disney Plus. You don't have to pay an additional amount of money to watch it. So the whole $30 thing is useless. It's pointless. But I guess if you're a family and you want to watch it, it would be cheaper than going out to the theater. So, I mean, there's that. But for me, worthless. Beyond worthless. But yeah, Cruella had this experiment. It wasn't the first movie to have this experiment. Raya and the Last Dragon did the same thing back in March. Before that, there was, Mulan. That was just Disney Plus Premier Access. Its theatrical release was canceled. But yeah, this was the second one to have theatrical and streaming around it. And Cruella, I mean, box office wise, it didn't do too great. I mean, it did much better than Those Who Wish Me Dead, but that's literally saying nothing. It made 86 million domestic, 229 million worldwide. For normal Disney standards, this is quite weak because their movies tend to do much better than this. They make 2, 3, 4 times this much. But to Corella's credit, it did have its opening weekend was a bit weak, but it was able to have pretty strong legs despite the streaming release. And actually stronger legs than most movies would have even in the pre-pandemic days. So it definitely had that going for it. And plus, this movie's getting a sequel. Yeah, I know. Surprising, right? It's getting a sequel where, which was likely the result of the whole Black Widow lawsuit. And there was rumors that Emma Stone would sue Disney like the same way Scarlett Johansson did. And I assume they were like, okay, we'll give you a sequel. We'll pay you more. Please don't sue us. That's how I believe the sequel came to fruition. But yeah, the fact that this is getting a sequel must mean it's not a complete loss. It's not a total failure, although its box office numbers are not too great at all. So yeah, this is this is a weird one. I can't call it a victory because again, its box office numbers look quite terrible in comparison to other big Disney movies. But the fact that it's getting a sequel, it means it wasn't a total loss either. So yeah, it's weird. It's weird. That's what I'm gonna classify it as. It's a weird situation, but it wasn't a complete bust. And plus, for a while, it had the highest gross out of any family movie in the market. So definitely had that going for it. Although that has been surpassed by another Disney movie, Jungle Cruise, which we'll talk about later on. But after Cruella, we got another HBO Max movie, The Conjuring 3, or The Conjuring: The Devil Made Me Do It. Uh, well, this movie, I mean, it was a part of the Conjuring universe, the biggest horror franchise of all time, so it had no reason to fail. But yeah, the HBO Max release made things extremely questionable. But to this movie's credit, it did better than anticipated. It opened with 24 million, and it's made 65 million in the States and 200 million worldwide. On a budget of 40 million, how is that not a success? Sure, it's not as strong as other Conjuring movies, but nobody was expecting that. I mean, this is like the what? Eighth? Hold on, let me count again. There was Conjuring, there was Annabelle, there's Conjuring 2, there's Annabelle Creation, Nun, Curse of La Llorona, Annabelle Comes Home. Yeah, this is the eighth one. For an eighth installment, this is quite good. Because around this time, this is when many people would tune out in large numbers. So the fact that it's even making this much money still is impressive, in my opinion. And out of all the HBO Max movies we've gotten, this is by far and away one of the more successful ones. So, yeah, Conjuring 3, you did well. You didn't do that great, but you did well. And you didn't embarrass yourself. So, congrats. But speaking of movies that embarrassed themselves, In the Heights. Oh no. Oh god. In the Heights. Where do I begin with this movie? I had high hopes for this movie because I thought, oh, Lin-Manuel Miranda, he's a household name after Hamilton, right? And the director of this movie did Crazy Rich Asians. That was a big hit a couple years ago. And this movie had a positive energy, positive vibe. So, and it's a musical. Musicals are popular, so this movie has to succeed. It has to, right? Well, I was wrong. Dead wrong. Horribly wrong. This movie was a disaster, a complete bust on every level because it opened with $11 million. It didn't even beat the third week of not Conjuring, Quiet Place 2, a movie that was theatrical only, by the way. It couldn't even beat the third week of that. Its legs were abysmal, and it's only made 29 million domestic, 43 million worldwide on a budget of 55 million. Yikes. And 55 million is not that expensive. I mean, some would call it expensive, but it's not. I mean, compared to other movies, it's pretty mid-range. So the fact that it wasn't even able to surpass its budget is terrible. Now, again, we can easily point to HBO Max, cutting its grosses, which, again, there's some truth to that. But now that I think about it, this movie had other factors going against it. One, the source material wasn't super well known by a majority of people, apparently, even with Lin-Manuel Miranda's name attached to it. And two, maybe Lin-Manuel Miranda isn't as big of a draw as Hollywood thinks he is. I mean, look what happened to Mary Poppins Returns. That was like during the height of Hamilton, like when it was really popping off, and that movie only did okay-ish, even with his involvement in it. So, yeah, I think this might be a case where the hype, yeah, the hype was bigger than the actual anticipation. So, yeah, yeah, this movie's a bust, absolute bust, and it should kind of prove that Lin-Manuel Miranda, if he's gonna have a career, he better stick with Hamilton because anything else he does is just not going to be as successful. And plus, I think he was canceled by some of his fans for this movie. So, yeah, this whole movie was a mistake for HBO Max, for Warner Brothers, for Lin-Manuel Miranda, for everyone. Although I heard it's very good, but still, it was a mistake. So yeah, that's the last stream movie we got for a while, for the rest of June, actually. The rest was theatrical. You don't get another streaming movie until Boss Baby 2. Boss Baby 2. Oh boy. This thing right here. Boss Baby 2. The sequel the world needed, the world wanted, the world desired, and the one we got on both the big screen and Peacock, Universal streaming service. And for its box office, it's really not good, especially in comparison to its predecessor, because, this movie only made, on a budget of 82 million, it's only made so far 57 million domestic, 109 million worldwide. In comparison, let's see if I can pull this up. In comparison, the first Boss Baby, which was in 2017, made 527 million worldwide. That's only, the sequel only made like a fifth of that. That's terrible. That looks really, really bad. Now, again, the family market has not been doing great in the pandemic, not by a long shot. But I still thought the movie would do slightly better than this. I mean, well, actually, I shouldn't have thought that, because the first Boss Baby, that first movie only had one joke, and the one joke was Aldrich Baldwin voices a baby. That's it. That was the one joke they had, and it worked. But apparently, it only worked that one time, because the second time, nobody showed up. Okay, some people did, but for the most part, nobody showed up. But apparently, this movie did well enough on Peacock to justify, doing this release strategy to Halloween Kills. So I guess it was semi-successful. Again, it's hard to judge if these movies are even successful or not, because the streaming thing makes things more complicated. But from a box office perspective, it's a dud. But from a streaming perspective, it must have been a hit. It must have gotten a lot of people to either watch the movie on Peacock or sign up for Peacock to watch the movie, which is the most important thing. You got to get those subscribers. You got to get those new subscribers to pay for the service. That's why this is happening. Because if you can convince them to watch, okay, I've lost my train of thought. Darn it. Okay. For these streaming platforms, the biggest thing is subscribers. So a good way to lure subscribers in is to put a big movie on the platform. That way, they want to sign up. If they want to watch that movie, they better sign up, pay that money, and so they can watch the movie. And after that, you got them. You got them. And you got their money. So that's why this is happening. But yeah, from a box office perspective, Boss Baby 2, not good. Streaming, apparently good. But yeah, that's Boss Baby 2. So weird movie. There's also Summer of Soul, which was on it was on Hulu, but I didn't cover it or really care about it all that much because it wasn't even like a wide release, so I just ignored it. But yeah, we can just ignore that too. Black Widow. Okay. This This is going to be a real complicated one. Black Widow, a movie that Disney promised it would stay theatrical, it would stay on the big screen, all that crap until they decided to give it the Disney Plus Premier Access treatment. And that treatment would end up biting them in the ass when Scarlett Johansson, the main star of the movie, sued them over this, sued them because her contract stated this would be theatrical only, right? It didn't account for the Disney Plus release, so she got pissed off and she sued Disney, and that lawsuit's still going on right now, at 2 months after it was dropped. So yeah, that's not a good look for Disney, not at all. But even ignoring that whole debacle, from a box office perspective, Black Widow, it's hard. For pandemic standards, it did pretty good, but for MCU standards, it's downright abysmal. And I'll show you just how abysmal it is, because with Black Widow, this is a movie people wanted for years, a movie that frankly should have came out years ago, but they only decided to do it now because they thought Captain Marvel was a more of a priority, which in hindsight was a mistake. But yeah, Black Widow, after many delays, it finally came out in July. But its box office, if you compare it to other MCU movies, it did worse than pretty much all of them. I think the only ones that did better than was the first Ant-Man, the first Captain America, the first Thor, and the Incredible Hulk. That's it. That's it. And as of right this moment, Shang-Chi, but it will soon surpass that within like a day or two. So yeah, Black Widow is definitely on the low end, both domestic and worldwide, with 377 million. Again, much worse than all the other MCU movies, even the smaller ones. So yeah, not a great look. Not a great look at all. This is definitely a case of streaming killing a movie's box office, especially if you look at Black Widow's box office. It's domestic, at least, because it started out fine. Like, it had a good preview number, a good Friday number, and then things just took a horrible turn, dropping 41%, then 25%, and then it fell 68% from week 1 to week 2. Worst second weekend drop in MCU history by a long shot. And it never really recovered after that. So I like to believe that Disney Plus Premier Access release cut its gross, because after people saw it in the theater, then like the rewatchability was just dead, because they can just watch it. They could pay money to watch on Disney Plus and watch it as many times as they want, or they can just wait it out and get it for free at a later date on Disney Plus. And yeah, like, ugh, this whole movie's weird to talk about, but to its credit, it is one of the biggest movies of the year, both domestic and worldwide. That can't be disputed. Even though it's about to lose that domestic, the domestic number one to Shang-Chi, which is something nobody thought would happen. And worldwide, it did much worse than F9 and Godzilla vs. Kong. Those did much better. But yeah, this movie, again, like Cruella, is very weird. It's weird. I can't call it a victory or a failure. So it's weird. Let's move on. Space Jam 2. Ick. Space Jam 2. Another HBO Max movie. This movie was a bust. And from a creative standpoint and a box office standpoint. Movie cost $150 million. And it's only made $6 million more than that worldwide. Yikes. That's a huge financial L, if you ask me. And yeah, I don't know if this is a case of HBO Max. I mean, maybe because its opening weekend. Actually, I think it is a bit more of an HBO Max problem because its opening weekend wasn't bad. It opened like 31 million, which was the biggest for a family movie, one of the biggest of the year. And I was thinking, oh, maybe this HBO Max thing isn't such a horrible idea. And then the second weekend happened. It dropped 69%. That should never, ever, ever, ever happen to a family movie. Ever. It never happens. It's super rare. And then it just plummeted after that, just week after week after week. And yeah, the movie's a total bust. And yeah, now would this movie have done better without HBO Max? Probably. I think its legs would have been slightly better, although there probably would have still been some front loading because this is a sequel to Space Jam, a movie that came out 25 years ago, a movie that has a strong cult following of people who love it to death, either, ironically or genuinely. And, I'm one of those people who loves the original Space Jam, even though it's a weird ass movie. This movie felt soulless. It felt like a cash grab. It felt very corporate, especially with all the numerous amounts of references. It got to the point of it just, ugh, it put such a bad taste in my mouth. And yeah, like, without the HBO Max release, it probably would have done better. But still, the movie's a dud. And yeah, it's just a bomb. Simple as that. But I still think HBO Max would have at least cut the losses. If without it, it would have cut the losses a little bit. But yeah, it was definitely a bomb. No question about that. So going to the next streaming movie, Jungle Cruise, the last so far, the last of the Disney Plus Premier Access movies. And, from its box office, it doesn't look great, but when compared to, again, we're talking about pandemic standards here. We're not talking about normal standards. Because if this was by normal standards, this movie would be a total disaster. But by pandemic standards, it didn't do too bad. Because its domestic tally is one of the biggest of the entire year. Hell, it's one of the few movies this year to make 100 million domestic. The only other movies that have been able to do that are Shang-Chi, Black Widow, F9, Quiet Place 2, Godzilla vs. Kong, Free Guy, and this. That's it. So it's in the elite group, if you ask me. But yeah, its opening weekend was 35 million, which was way better than I thought it would be, because I thought that Disney Plus Premier Access thing would really kill it, but it didn't. And its legs have been pretty good to the point where it reached over 100 million domestic. So, hooray! This movie is now the biggest family movie of the year. I see that lasting until, I'm going to say, Sing 2 in December. I think that has a strong chance of surpassing this. But there's also Enchanto, but that's going to be in theaters for like 30 days until it hits Disney Plus. So I don't know. My money's on Sing 2. But yeah, Jungle Cruise, biggest family movie of the year. So it didn't completely embarrass itself, although its worldwide numbers aren't very good. That's mainly because overseas is really slacking, and it's been quite chaotic for many of these movies to do well overseas. So it's not really any of their fault. It's just that the overseas market has just been a disaster. But yeah, Jungle Cruise, you didn't embarrass yourself. You did okay-ish. And apparently it did okay-ish on Disney Plus Premier Access too, so hooray. Now, time for a tragic one. The Suicide Squad. This makes me sad, because this movie is so good. It deserved so much better. But facts are facts. This movie's a disaster. Box office wise, it cost 185 million. It's been 166 million total. It's only made 55 million domestic. It opened to 26 million opening weekend, and then it just fell like a stone afterwards, dropping 71% week 2, which is one of the worst second weekend drops I've ever seen for like a wide release. And yeah, there's quite a bit of factors that resulted in this movie's downfall. The biggest one was, I believe, well, there's really two. The first was its predecessor, the original Suicide Squad in 2016, a movie that, although was popular, highly successful, it was hated by a majority of people. Many people did not like the movie. They thought, it was just, the whole thing just felt like a mess from start to finish. The whole Jared Leto Joker, just just bad. And, that whole first movie was heavily edited and affected because of that Bohemian Rhapsody trailer for that movie. That trailer was so popular and people loved it so much that Warner Brothers decided to change the movie to fit that trailer. And doing so, you made it an absolute mess. But it made money. So a sequel was a no-brainer. But this one was different. This wasn't like a traditional, the gang's all back. No, not quite. Only a few members of the original movie are here. The rest are new characters. This is more of a reboot than a sequel, which probably confused some people. They were like, what the heck even is this movie? Hell, I was confused for a little bit regarding what this movie even was. So that definitely didn't help. And there's also the fact that this predecessor, despite how bad it was, it had some excellent marketing. Marketing that made a lot of people watch that first movie. It convinced people, especially non-comic book people, to watch the movie. This movie's marketing was a lot more lackluster. It didn't really hit the right notes. It felt kind of off. And, a lot of the jokes in the trailers were actually some of the weaker ones in the movie. The movie's quite funny. It has some really good jokes. But unfortunately, none of those jokes were in the trailers, which you could say is a good thing because it doesn't spoil stuff. But at the same time, the trailers made the movie look kind of iffy. Just not kind of ick, It didn't make the movie look too good. And again, the HBO Max release, I think that definitely killed its legs. Because again, look at its legs. Like, you can see just how much it just fell apart. It fell apart very quickly after its opening weekend, which wasn't even good in the first place. But then after that, it just, oh man. Like, the huge yikes. But there is one positive, I guess. Peacemaker, John Cena's character, he's getting an HBO Max series for next year. So good for him and his character. But I think this might be the last we see of the Suicide Squad on the big screen, at least for the foreseeable future, which is a damn shame because this movie is really good. Please watch it. Please watch it on HBO Max, on Blu-ray, on 4K. Watch it. Please support it. This movie deserved so much more than what it got. So, yeah. Yeah, that was an absolute travesty. What happened to that movie? After that, we got two more streaming movies to talk about. First is Paw Patrol the movie, which was a Paramount Plus release, both theatrical and Paramount Plus. Now, when this movie was coming out, there were many concerns about this whole Delta variant and how it would affect family movies. And it caused a lot of family movies to have second thoughts about releasing. Clifford the Big Red Dog, if you don't know, it was supposed to come out September, this actually last week, until they decided to remove it from the calendar because of this whole situation. Granted, it does have a new date for this November, but for a while it was pretty uncertain. And Hotel Transylvania 4, that skipped theaters and went to Amazon, and Addams Family 2 now has PVOD and theatrical release date. So yeah, things were looking a little bleak for this movie, especially because of the whole streaming release. Regal Cinemas wouldn't play it, so that's a substantial amount. That's a bit of revenue, a lot of potential revenue lost. But to Paw Patrol's credit, it did pretty good. It's made 37 million domestic. Its worldwide total isn't updated. It's at around 100 million, I think, which for a movie that only cost like $26 million, quite good, very good, in fact. And considering how Paw Patrol is like this huge brand, with the TV show and all the merchandise and all the toys and whatnot you see everywhere at your local Walmart, there's no way this movie's gonna lose any money. So yeah, this movie's an undisputed success in my book. So yeah, not much more to say than it was a success. It didn't fail. Well, you know what did fail? You want to know what failed spectacularly? The final movie we're going to be talking about, Reminiscence, another HBO Max release. And out of all of them, this did the absolute worst. Absolute worst. It is just a horror show. Now, how do I even describe this? My expectations for this movie weren't high at all. I thought it would open with like 9 million or something, which would be low for an original sci-fi movie, especially one with like a 67 million budget. It didn't even hit half of that. It didn't hit a third or a fourth. It barely hit a fifth. It only opened with less than $2 million for the whole 3 days. And it's made less than $4 million total, and only 14 million worldwide. It's one of the biggest bombs in history. In fact, its opening weekend set a record for the worst opening for a movie that opened over 3,000 theaters. So this movie set the worst type of record. Hooray. Hooray for this movie. So this movie had quite a bit going against it. And I knew it would fail. I just didn't expect it to fail this hard, though. First thing, Hugh Jackman, whenever he's not playing a signature character, his track record is very spotty. People are not going to watch everything he's in. Okay? So that's the first thing. Second thing, original sci-fi can be a very tough sell. There have been plenty of original sci-fi movies the last 10 years that have done terrible box office wise, and the ones that do well either look good, look appealing, and for other sci-fi movies, they either have a strong brand name attached to it, like a Star Wars or a Star Trek or a Marvel. This had none of that. It had absolutely none of that. And that HBO Max release was the final nail in the coffin. Although I sincerely doubt this movie would have done well even without HBO Max. Again, it had way too much going against it, and it would have failed no matter what. But the HBO Max release only made things worse. So, yeah, Reminiscence, absolute disaster. My opinion, the big loser of the summer. I know there were movies that probably lost more money, like The Suicide Squad, Space Jam 2, and all that. But this, in my opinion, is the big loser because of how horrific it really did in terms of actual box office. So, yeah. And that's it for all of the streaming movies. As you see, it has not. The results have been quite poor. We've barely have any real success stories in here. I mean, the only ones we really have are Paw Patrol, uh, uh, Jungle Cruise to an extent, uh, Black Widow to an extent, and gotta scroll all the way back up, and Conjuring 3, and Cruella to an extent. That's it. That's it. Everything else has been a disaster. Absolute flop. It's been a flop land. And I don't see it getting better for the rest of the year. I mean, for all the other streaming movies. Grant, we only have a few more. Let me check. There was Malignant. That was a bust. There was Cry Macho. Another bust. After that, we got Many Saints of New York. Oh, there's also Addams Family 2. That's PVOD. I don't know if that quite counts. Let's just say it counts. There's that. Halloween Kills, that's on Peacock. Dune, that's HBO Max. Clifford the Big Red Dog, that's now Paramount Plus. King Richard's HBO Max. Let's see. And I think the last one is going to be Matrix Resurrections, which will be on HBO Max. And then that's it. And I think of all these movies I just mentioned, I think only Matrix Resurrections, Clifford the Big Red Dog, Dune, and Halloween Kills have... Well, I guess Many Saints of New York could have a chance if enough Sopranos fans show up to watch it. But yeah, I don't think even those I think will do the best. I don't think they're going to do that good in comparison to some of these theatrical only movies, which I will cover in the next video. But yeah, so for the summer, streaming movies did not do very good. So now for the next video, we look at the theatrical movies, the theatrical only movies, and we get to see how they did. And just look at the numbers, it's quite clear they did much better. The hit to miss ratio was far superior. But again, we'll talk about that more in the next video. But yeah, anywho. Yeah, that is it. That is all. Make sure to subscribe, like this video, leave a comment, turn on notifications, share the whole drill. Want to check out more videos like this? I got a playlist on the homepage of all previous recap videos I've done on the channel, from the monthly videos to the special seasonal or even the yearly video I did on 2020. So if you want to watch any of those, you can go right ahead. There's also the canceled series where I go over all the movies that were supposed to come out but didn't because of a certain virus. I just did one about Clifford and Clifford the Big Red Dog and Fantastic Beasts 3. That's part 82. So if you want to watch that or any other canceled episodes, that way you're up to date on all these movies, you can go right ahead. All 82 episodes right there for your viewing pleasure. And there's also box office predictions where I predict box office for movies. This weekend, I got to do Courageous Legacy, Dear Evan Hansen, and Eyes of Tammy Faye. And then the week after that, let me see. Let me scroll down. Oh, God, there's 4. Why? There's 4. I got to do Addams Family 2, the Jesus music, whatever the heck that is. Many Saints of New York, and Venom 2. And then after that, No Time to Die. Just one movie. Thank God. So these next 2 weeks are going to be rough. But if you want to watch any of the past prediction videos I made this year, you can go right ahead. And yeah, that's it. That's all. I am out. Goodbye.